Hello, good afternoon. Welcome back. I hope you all had a good break and were able to grab something to eat. So this afternoon, we are going to talk about two very interesting topics. Okay, basically, our Defender for Threat Intelligence and ESM. That will be our first session. And then we are going to talk about our Entra permission management solution as well. So we really appreciate that you stayed with us for this afternoon session. So the first session, the speaker will be myself. So I'll introduce myself very quickly. Sambak with us, Senior Business Strategy Manager at Microsoft. And I really look after the technical aspects of our security and privacy solution. So for this first session, I also have the pleasure to have Peter Wheeler, who will also present himself to deliver this session with me. So this is the our agenda. So we will start, by having a short session on the vision strategy and the reason why basically Microsoft acquired the company called RiskIQ and the two products that we have now. After that, I'll pass the mic to Peter, who will share his insights about the threat intelligence solution that we have now in the market. After that, I will come back again to just give you a high-level overview and a demo of our ESM solution and present a demo. And Peter will also come back and present a demo. And of course, we will remain available if you have any question throughout the different sessions. So after the first session about TI and ESM, we will also have very packed type of session for the intra permission management coming from the CloudNox acquisition with the same type of sessions speaking about the vision and the strategy. And then this is the ask that we got from many partners working and how we can initiate the initial configuration, and also how to use basically the intra permission management to remediate over permission access. And then the last session that will host with Brad from my team, which will also present, what do we have in terms of partner program for the intra permission management solution. So with that, let's get started. So actually, I just wanted to start by giving a little bit of background about why Microsoft is really entering into this threat intelligence market. So previously, as you know, we already had our own threat intelligence coming from the intelligence security graph, for those who are familiar with this term. So which were really surfacing, all the IOCs, all the malicious type of informations, and also some insights coming from a security researcher, but the threat intelligence feeds were only used basically on Microsoft security solutions. So if you had a Defender for Endpoint or Defender for Office 365 on the phishing side, you will benefit from this threat intelligence type of feeds. So now most of our partners were also asking, basically, we know you already have all this threat intelligence that you are using in our solution, but what if we don't own any Microsoft security solution, but still want to get some threat intelligence feeds from you guys, because we know you cover, you have one of the largest cloud solution provider in the market, and you are on Windows devices, so you really have a very good insight. So the vision and the strategy here is basically Microsoft. We really aim to be, the threat intelligence source, and the first source of quality for insight that will protect the world from all cyber attacks. So what does that mean? So it's basically means that we want to deliver the threat intelligence experience across all of products and services, So this also, means that having with very little configuration, the threat intelligence information surfacing to our current solutions, but also surfacing on Sentinel, which, by the way, today you already get, some insight coming from the Risk IQ, for your syslog type of logs and CEF, and we will see that also in detail with the session that Peter will present. So. If you now go to the next slide here, we will see really what's our vision in your organization. Okay, so the first use case, of course, as any threat intelligence vendor, is to really help your security team and supercharge your defense with global TI. And what that does that means actually? So it's really first identify the infrastructure, the adversary's infrastructure, identify the adversary first, sorry, and their infrastructure. So let's say you have an IOC, you have a malicious IP address that you have detected in your organization, but you also want to further investigate to see what are the other type of infrastructure that belongs to the same adversary. So if it's a covert strike, for example, you want to know what are the additional IP addresses, and to be really able to proactively block some of the threats even before they are really live in your environments. And we also want you basically to understand what is your external attack surface. So this is really why we have now two products, Defender for TI and Defender for ESM, and I will touch on a little bit on how we are really collecting all this data. So the ESM piece, so we'll have further conversation about that, but this is not a very new market category. We are seeing more and more customers and partners going to the market. I don't want to say name, but we have many competitors as well that are entering into the ESM market, because with the digital transformation and the fact that customers have many cloud service providers, and also shadow IT, one of the problems that most customer encounters. So it's really key to really understand what is your attack surface, because you cannot really protect what you don't know, right? So this solution can really help you, to gain this visibility about your internal facing asset. So how do we do that? How do the former Risk IQ team did actually? So we have some web crawlers around the internet that we scan the whole IPv4 address space. So we really have in-depth type of communication with the web servers. Of course, there are some scripted and random interaction just to be able to grab, for example, the tracker data, cookie data. But we are also passively collecting the WHOIS data, the DNS record, and in a sense that if you are a security analyst and you want to go and start looking for a particular IOC, to echo to my previous point, you will be able to get all these details that we are going to talk about again in a follow-up session with Peter. So of course, yeah, we have active and passive sensors that will really scan again the whole IPv4 address space. So if there is a modification on a particular infrastructure, we will very quickly also be able to detect that. Okay. So what is the scope basically for the threat intelligence? So again, we have two separate products, but they will all rely on the information that we have collected. So the first one, as you know, will be Defender for external attack surface management, which is actually also a form of threat intelligence that provide, as I said previously, a good understanding of all the internal facing asset or externally available to adversary to act. And also we are embedding basically the threat intelligence into the Microsoft security services. So One of the first situations that we will present shortly is also including the threat intelligence feeds directly to our Microsoft 365 Defender, so our XDR ecosystem, with really a focus on the endpoint. So watch out for that. We will be able to talk about that very soon. And of course, the threat intelligence portal that will provide context on the threats, the threat actors. Will have some artifacts, some articles that will really also give you a good understanding of the new trends that we have discovered. But most importantly, what are the IOCs that we have, behind the scenes, basically. So as you may know, Microsoft is really a platform. Okay, so we are not just providing one solution. So if you look at we are integrating now in more than 50 categories. Going from the security side of things with our XDR, to the compliance. So we had an airlift yesterday about Priva and many other compliance solutions that we have, and also the identity and access management, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. So what the threat intelligence will bring on top of that is really integrating, basically the very high fidelity feeds. So for a security analyst, when it is in an incident, it will be, directly from the portal, be able to find additional information about a particular domain name, a particular IP address, and even a particular file hash, for example. And the common theme among those solutions and our global platform, basically, is that we want them to be easy. And so then you will be spending your time not necessarily on configuring, all the platform, but rather in investigation and really protecting also your customers. So the two solution will be very, very easy to implement, and we will see that in a short demo as well. So and again, just to finish on that, Microsoft is in the platform business. The threat intelligence is really key into our overall platform and ecosystem. I'm sure you're familiar with Microsoft Sentinel. We talked about this morning. Our XDR story with Microsoft 365 Defender that has capabilities around the endpoint protection, the email protection, and also we have announced at Ignite, if you had a chance to attend some of those sessions, the automatic attack description. So which means that we will really proactively, when we detect something in your customer environment, we'll be able to block that. And there is one particular example that I like to highlight here is to be able, for example, to disable an account when we find that this account is launching additional type of threats inside the organization. So previously we had some challenges. So because if we disable the account on the cloud and you had Active Directory and the synchronization, so after a while the account will become active again. But with the automatic attack description, and now with the integration with our Defender for Identity solution, we are just able to disable the account directly from the on-premises environment. So which is really providing a lot of value for our customers and our partners. And of course, we also have our Defender for Cloud solution, which also all rely basically on the threat intelligence feeds that can help them being really more effective. So with our Defender for Cloud solution, so again, just as a reminder, so we have the CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, and also the Cloud Workload Protection. And we are really also looking at integrating more and more type of threat intelligence feeds in those environments. Okay, so again, just to finish on that, we are probably at Microsoft, the largest cloud solution providers that had all the capabilities coming from the email security and even the email platform with Microsoft Office 365. We are gathering the threat intelligence from our Xbox network. For example, you can see the number of signals that we process per day and the number of security researchers that we have, plus the number of threats that globally we are blocked. So by really using all these high fidelity signals that we process, of course, with machine learning, we are also now including the feeds that we are getting basically from the RiskIQ acquisition. So with that, this was just to give you a high-level overview of what we are aiming to do with our threat intelligence platform, how we are integrating them into our overall XDR and security platform. So post the acquisition, we have two main products, so Defender for TI and Defender for ESM. And so with that, I'd like to pass the mic to Peter, who will present himself and talk a little bit about our Microsoft Defender for Threat Intelligence solution. So Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Samba. That's a brilliant introduction. So hi, I'm Pete. I've come over from the RiskIQ acquisition. So I've been with RiskIQ for probably 3 and a bit years prior to the acquisition. So I'm here really just to talk to you around the capabilities of the threat intelligence platform, and then, as Samba kind of highlighted, in the second session, really to walk through some use cases and some portal usage and things like that. So I'm just going to share my screen. I've got a few slides to run through with you, just to kind of really to build on Samba's introduction there, I think, and just to kind of bring out the capabilities and to discuss more kind of how we do this and why it's important for Microsoft, and ideally why it's important for you and your customers, really. So without further ado, let's just kind of crack into it and let's see where it goes. So Samba kind of showed some of these numbers before, right? And certainly when we joined Microsoft, I think it was really important to kind of see these numbers and understand how important it was from a threat intelligence perspective, because these are massive numbers across multiple aspects of Microsoft. And one of our colleagues in the many threat intelligence areas within Microsoft actually kind of brought this to us, really, when he said, whenever a customer comes to Microsoft, whenever they come to the cloud, whenever they bring their information to us, whether it be Office, whether it be Xbox, whether it be Azure, they're bringing their threats with them. And for us to be able to protect those workloads, we need to be, really understanding the threats and understanding the signals that are coming in and be able to stop them and to protect them. So I think, when you look at these numbers, I don't think there's anything that comes close to the amount of information that comes into Microsoft and allows us to understand exactly what the attacker is doing. So somebody told me a while ago that cybersecurity is a game. It's probably an infinite game. It's there's no rules. We don't know who the players are, but key probably to winning this or staying ahead of this in some way is the intelligence. And with this information and the ability to bring this information to you as an intelligence form, it's quite a powerful it's a powerful proposition. And building on that, right, is I think as Samba kind of highlighted, is that ability to take that RiskIQ information and tool set and technology that we've built over the last kind of 12, 13 years, and really start to map the internet for you. So in slides coming up, what you'll see is an understanding of how we do that and how we bring that information together. But ultimately what we're doing is we're taking that information and that knowledge of of the internet, you know, crunching the numbers, putting it through our own technology, and basically making it available to you in the other suites that you're aware of, and ultimately being able to take that into, you know, items like Sentinel to make sure that you're getting the information that you need when you need it to protect you and your customers. So, you know, I think when we look at that, you know, that kind of kill chain piece, right? And, you know, we've seen this many times before, you know, in various kind of guises across time. But I think what's important to understand here is that, you know, previously what we were seeing really is, you know, the defense really started at the firewall, right? This is where, you know, this is where the perimeter of the network, you know, is, and ultimately, you know, there was a number of, you know, platforms at your disposal, really, to understand what that, you know, what was coming in, and using the, you know, using those platforms at your disposal to stop them. However, you know, it's no secret really to understand that most of the attacks start to occur actually outside of the network, and certainly from organizations now, you know, their whole presence is omni-channel, right? It's not just within the network now. There are so many pieces of information that now reside outside of the network. Okay, actually now understanding what is out there and what is a potential threat to your organization allows you to be a bit more proactive to the threats. Okay, so previously, you know, when you think about the Microsoft suite, the Defender suite, it was really focused on that kind of internal network, Defender for Cloud, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, etc., etc. But now with the acquisition of RiskIQ and the ability to add that external view, what you start to see now is an understanding of the events that are occurring outside of the network, even before they start to get to you. And I think, you know, this kind of slide here really sums it up, right? You know, everything that happens outside of that network, certainly from a phishing or malware perspective, you know, is now being understood and being able to, you know, the information is kind of easy, or, you know, easier to see now, okay, because we can see things that previously, you know, were not available to us. So, you know, whether it be, you know, deep and dark web information and discussions about, you know, kind of what's going on, really to this point here, right, where information starts to be stood up, infrastructure starts to be stood up in a way that is preparing for some kind of attack. And if you can see this information at this point, okay, it starts to give you the ability, as I say, to be proactive against those attacks. So when you think about all those signals that are being collected by Microsoft, and you think about all that information that is coming into us and our ability to see that information right across, you know, the spectrum, we probably see more than most other organizations. Okay, so being prepared, understanding what's out there, okay, and then being able to take that information and use it in a proactive way within Sentinel, for instance, you know, is key. And when you think about that infrastructure, and when you think about how that is being used, this is where that whole understanding of what's happening outside of the network becomes really important, because an attacker can't do anything without making a noise. Okay, you know, they have to use the internet to create their attacks. So, you know, just the mere fact that, you know, they are standing up infrastructure, they are, you know, registering domains, they are, you know, standing up frameworks on host, they're, you know, making their sites email capable with MX records, you know, and things like that, and they're using, you know, the IP space to actually transmit information, actually means that they're actually creating an awful lot of noise. Okay, And our ability to see that and map that actually feeds in massively to that threat intelligence piece, right? Because it means that we're listening, we can hear it, and we're collecting that information, we're making it available to you, so you can now start to understand exactly what's going on. Okay, so I think the key takeaway from this slide in my mind really is that there's just noise out there, right? Whenever they stand anything up, okay, there's going to be a trail, there's going to be a signal. And the Risk IQ platform, the Microsoft Threat Intelligence platform now, of course, is actually, hearing those signals, collecting those signals and making them available to you. So if we kind of take this information now and actually understand what is happening in the background, okay, we're listening to all of this noise, right? We're listening to all of these signals, and we're basically collecting it. Okay, so the system acts as kind of like a headless browser, and it goes out and interacts with the network, just as kind of Samba mentioned there. But you can see here there is an awful lot of information that's being collected. This is all open source information. This is all public information. There are no, we're not ethical hackers. We don't do brute force attacks. We don't do anything like that. What we're doing is we're collecting those noises and those signals that we hear across the internet. Okay, and we take that information and we basically break it down and we put it into sets. Okay, so we capture the full DOM. Okay, so that allows us to understand the web components and the host pairs and the trackers and everything that's going on there. Passive DNS information, who is information, there's third-party lists. It's quite the threat intelligence industry is quite small, really. So there's we work with partners as well to actually collect those kind of phishing lists and malware lists, etc., etc. You add the Microsoft intelligence onto that, and as I say, the information that you have at your disposal to now start protecting your information becomes really, really vast, right? So it's the ability for us to be able to take that information, listen to it, break it down, put it into sets, okay, and make these sets available for you to actually use and search. That's that's the most important thing there. And what does that mean? Okay, so there's an awful lot of information there, of course. What it means from a threat hunting perspective and from a the ability to understand what's out there, we've historically called it infrastructure chaining. Okay, and what that means is that potentially you've got a piece of information. Okay, you've got something there, okay, that means that you can follow a chain, right? So something has come in, something of interest. It may be an IP address, it may be a domain, it could be a piece of information that a user has come to you about an email address or whatever it is. Okay, there is a piece of information that now is you need to understand. And because we've got, just kind of step back here, because we've got all of this information and because we've broken it down into meaningful areas, it basically starts to mean now that you can start following a chain and making sure that that one single IOC that you've picked up, okay, whether it be in Sentinel, user information, etc., you can now understand the rest of the infrastructure that sits behind that. Okay, so following an IP address, as we saw with the signals and the information that we're collecting, and the fact that a attacker cannot can't stand up infrastructure without making those signals, we can actually start following that information down. So we can understand that an IP address obviously has a host on it, there's a domain, but there may be many other subdomains there. Okay, and the ability to see that and understand that means that you've taken that one single IOC and now you're understanding the whole infrastructure that sits around it. which is great from a threat hunting perspective, and it's great because you've started with one piece of, you know, potentially malicious information, and now you're understanding everything that sits around that. So your ability to, you know, to block that information and make sure that you know, your organization or customers are protected is now second to none. Okay, so it's all about signals, it's all about understanding the infrastructure, but it's also about understanding the history of that infrastructure as well. Okay, because infrastructure changes over time, and certainly what we've been used to over the last few years is the ability to take that signal and that noise and understand how it's changed over a period of time as well. So again, as threat hunters and trying to protect your organization, you can actually get a historic view as well of what these things look like. Okay, and so we take this information and, you know, we create sets, and ultimately we make it available to you really within a portal. Okay, and I know, you know, when we get into the next session, what we'll be doing is we'll be, you know, kind of walking through some of these data sets. We'll be walking through how this integrates into Sentinel and how this, works in your favor. But, you know, what you'll see as we kind of walk through the platform is is how we're taking that information, how we're linking that information, how we're making it available to you in, you know, in things like article cards. Okay, so, you know, the ability for you to understand the threat and the tradecraft and how this affects various kind of verticals and elements of infrastructure, maybe even to looking at, you know, kind of, you know, malicious scores put against domains and IP addresses and things like that that you can quickly understand. Okay, so again, from a visual and from a threat hunting perspective, you now have the ability to understand if something is malicious or suspicious, and you can kind of act on it, right down to kind of the data sets and the ability to pivot on those and search further in the chain to understand where those things are. Okay, so brief introduction there. I think we'll dive into a little bit more when we start looking at the portal in depth. That's probably where I have got to on this. So stop sharing my screen. And Samba, I'm going to hand back to you unless there's any more questions.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So actually, there's one question about the licensing for threat intelligence portal. So can you maybe give us a little information about that?
Yeah. So the licensing of the threat intelligence, there's two parts to this. Okay, well, there's three parts to it really. Okay, there is the feed that comes into Sentinel. Okay, and what's quite interesting about that, the initial feed, and again we'll look at this as we go through the demonstration, the actual feed coming into Sentinel is we give that for free, right? You will get that information free of charge from Microsoft as part of the Defender suite. So it's within our interest to make sure that you are protected. When you actually want to go into the portal and you want to look at that portal, there is something called a Workbench license. Okay, it's an analyst license, it's a named user license, and that's a one-to-one element. So that's Samba at Microsoft.com is one license, Peter at Microsoft.com is one license. Okay, so there's an actual analyst license that is available. And also later this year, you'll be pleased to know, okay, there will actually be an API license as well. That is in two parts. If you buy a number of licenses, that's actually bundled in, so you'll get that for free. And for those of you who have used RiskIQ before, you probably were aware there was an API limit. Okay, Microsoft would be a bit more generous, so there's no upper limit to the queries that you make there. Okay, so three elements there really. There's a free feed, okay, that you can see. If you need to investigate further, if you need to use the portal, there's a you know, an analyst license. And then, you know, if you want to even go even further into the data sets and you want to actually start putting these things out, there's an API license as well.
That's great. Thank you. I would just want to add that there is also a freemium version. So if you have an Azure AD account, you can, as of today, without no additional work, go to ti.defender.microsoft.com, and you will get access to the portal that Peter will present, you know, later on. Of course, you won't have all the data because we keep some of them for our premium users, but still, it can be interesting to just go and have a look at this portal as well. So yeah, thank you very much, Peter. So very interesting presentation. So again, we will cover more in a second. So in the second part of the session, I also wanted to talk to you about our Defender for ESM solution, basically. So if you look at what's the Gartner definition of ESM, is, you know, a solution that will give you the outside-in view of your infrastructure. So think of the, you know, digital assets such as servers, website, cloud applications, domain name, codes, IP address. So all those kind of you know, assets that belong to organization, and maybe you are not aware of that. So that's the really key point here with the ESM solution. It's really to give you, you know, and we will explain a little bit later how we are able to discover your internal facing asset, but giving you, you know, this information about, hey, these are all the infrastructure that we think belongs to organization. So the ESM also adds value, basically, you know, to the vulnerability and threat program, because when we detect the assets, internet-facing assets, we are also able to give you some information about the vulnerabilities around those assets. Okay, so yeah, the internet is the network, as Peter mentioned. You know, and I think we all know that with the digital transformation and the fact that we have all sort of services and even some time, and this is the real world example that I have from one of my partners. So when we were doing the POC in customer environments, we usually find that there are some services, you know, that are out there that the IT team is not even aware of that. So usually you will have internally something that we call CAB, Change Approval Board. And so if there are any modifications to the infrastructure, it needs to go, you know, through this board. You need to present what you are basically trying to change in infrastructure and get the validation. In some of the largest organizations that we speak with, so this can only take time. And unfortunately, it's sometimes just easier for a developer or one of the, you know, IT team. I don't want to point fingers, but just this is what we are seeing, to just go and create basically one service out of the original process. And this also leads to shadow IT, and also ultimately this is a risk, you know, that can expose the organization to malicious threats. So it's really critical to you know, understand what is the attack surface. Again, I said this morning, but I would say again, you cannot really protect what you don't know, and the ESM can be really instrumental in giving you, you know, all the internet-facing assets that you have, and also the vulnerabilities around those assets as well. So there are several you know, key challenges that the solution can help solve. So we covered earlier we spoke about the rapid digital transformation. There is also the vulnerability component that is very important. So we are the solution not really a vulnerability scanner per se, but can give you information about the vulnerability that we have detected. And the way we do that is by interacting you know, in a passive way with your websites, if it's Apache or something, and even, you know, all your internet-facing assets, basically, not only limited to Apache, but this was an example. And so, yeah, get the information about the attack surface visibility. We spoke about the shadow IT, but also sometimes there are just some human errors. So, rapidly being able to detect that maybe, there is a management port that is publicly available to the internet. Maybe it was a mistake. So the solution can also get and give you this visibility. So we really have three main use cases. The first one is the discovery, which is, again, I cannot stress that enough. This is critical. And once we have discovered all the internet-facing assets and we have the data about the vulnerability, now we can prioritize the work that we need to do in order to reduce these vulnerabilities. And this is also great business opportunity for partners to go and sit with customers, understand what is the attack surface, and then help them reduce that attack surface with some, consulting capabilities. So once you have discovered and you prioritize the work, you need to secure, and again, in the prioritization and the securing the information and the assets, the partners are just critical to help customers, basically. So once we say that, one of the questions that we get asked often is, okay, so how do you guys how do you discover the internet-facing assets? So what information do you need? And actually, we leverage, and in our terminology, we call seeds. So this can be a domain name, this can be an IP address, this can be an ASN number, autonomous system number, for largest organizations that have a BGP, for example. So we will just use one of these information. So if you take the domain seed, for example, and then we will really start building the attack surface, because if you have a domain name, you can find the hosts behind this domain name, or hosts that are attached to this domain name, and then you can find the IP address, the IP address block, and really you will then be able to connect the dots and really collect and understand what is the attack surface for a particular organization. Okay, so, and previously we covered that. So today we have basically two main use cases. So the first one is the shadow IT, and the second one is being able to prioritize the vulnerabilities that we will discover. And again, the way that we do it is by having interaction with web servers, and this is the same type of capabilities that we have as well. And as Peter mentioned, the collection of all the data that we have that you can leverage after doing your investigation when you are hunting also, for example. So finding the internet-facing assets, connect with them, and really getting the list of all the vulnerabilities that can then be prioritized after that. Okay, so this is the second use case. And again, you will receive the deck. So I have some of the information that maybe we didn't hear, but really just wanted to give the high level overview, and also with the deck you will be able to reference that in the future. Okay, so how we are different, because as I said previously, in the market you have many vendors that are now entering into the ESM type of market. So the solution was really built in Azure, so no agent to deploy. It's very, very easy. You have 30 days trial if you want to start the ESM type of discovery for your organization or for your customer. We support multi-cloud, so it's not really only about Azure, but AWS, GCP. We will have some advanced integration with the current Microsoft security portfolio. So the way we are thinking about it is, today you have the Defender for Cloud solution, which is our CSPM and CWPP capabilities that can really protect the organization and your assets that you are aware they exist. You have an agent that you deployed, so you really manage those assets. So the ESM will really bring additional insight to the solution, and basically just saying, hey, these are the list of additional, servers, assets that we have discovered and that we believe belongs to your organization. Okay, so this will give you the outside in view, and so then you can take some more, remediation measures to go and bring those assets under your management umbrella, because you need to have compliance about those and also understand the vulnerabilities. So those solutions are really complementary, so they work hand in hand. The Defender for Cloud for the stuff that they exist, that you protect, and the ESM that will bring basically additional insights about the stuff that you may not be aware they even existed, right? So what I like to do, over the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, is really just to connect to the platform and to start with you guys, a demo environment for ESM. So again, ESM is a service on Azure. Okay, so there is no infrastructure that you need to deploy. And let's go here and start. So when you are creating a new workplace, this is how it works in Azure. You will be welcome, by this page and asking you, so what's the name of the organization that you're trying to build the attack surface, all right? And so Microsoft have already a list of pre-built, attack surface. So our recommendation is when you're starting, to use this product, to first look for the organization that you're trying to build the attack surface for. Okay, so in my demo environment, I want to create something for Contoso because it already exists. But if this was not the case, you will have the option, as we said previously, to enter the IP address, the domain name, the ASN number, and this is what we call seeds. But this will usually take up to 48 hours to really start and presenting you the information that we have collected. But if you are using the pre-built type of information that we already have, and I click here to start the attack surface discovery. So in this case, I would not have to wait for the initial, let's say 48 hours, for the report to be populated, but you will find it directly here. And because Contoso is the demo type of organization that we use, Internet Microsoft, I don't necessarily have all the information about the SSL certificates and others. And also because this is recorded, I did not want to use any other company attack surface to present the information. But at least we were able to drill down here and get some information. So keep in mind that for the ESM, this is on Azure, you will have 30 days trial. And it's really important, before the end of the 30-day trial, to cancel it if the plan is really not to fully implement the solution, because there will be some costs associated with that. So just make sure maybe to have a reminder in your calendar to just go on the day 25th to just check if everything is working as expected, and what would be the potential next step if you don't want to be billed for the solution. And again, we'll touch on also a little bit about the pricing. So in my dashboard here, I will get the list, of all the attacks, the high severity type of threats that I have discovered. That I have some servers that are vulnerable, and the attack surface priorities, will be again by high severity, medium, and low. I will get here the list of all the assets that belongs to the organization, and the pricing will be basically, based on the number of assets. So IP address, domain name, host name, and we will see that. So if I go here in the inventory, here I will see the lists of all the assets that belong to my organization, and only the assets that are in the approved state will be part of the billing. So this is also is a way, for example, if you're working with your customers and on the inventory, you're seeing that some of the IP addresses are not really part of the customer organization. So you can just modify it and change the state from approved to something else here, to candidate, to dependency, and we have our documentation that can explain the difference between those. And then this asset will no longer be counted for the pricing. So if I click here on contoso.com organization, I will see here, what are the services that are, running behind this IP address, the trackers, the web components. I have Apache or many others. What are the SSL certificates and many others. Again, because this is a demo environment, I may not have many things to show, but I really highly encourage you to work with your customers. It's free for the first 30 days and just identify what will be their attack surface. So as of today, we have several reports. The first one is the attack surface summary that will give you some information about, for example, the SSL certificates that you have, if some of them are expiring or if some of them have already expired. So this is also an information that you want to have to include overall risk management program inside the organization. So we get here the report about the security posture that will also give some information about who is the registrar. If you have some services that are hosted on Azure, how many services you have, how many IP addresses you have. And this is also a very quick way to understand if there are any shadow IT inside an organization. So let's say at Microsoft, our primary cloud service provider is Azure. But for some reason, we are seeing some Microsoft assets also on AWS and Alibaba Cloud, for example. So in this case, it can be very easy to just go drill down a little bit and understand what are the services that are running in Azure and the reason behind, the fact that we have the services on AWS. There is also one report that I really wanted to show here is the OWASP top 10. So which really will give you, how many servers or how many, web servers, IP addresses, domain name you have in each category. And if you drill down and if you have one server, you will then be able to detect and find if there are some additional vulnerabilities behind those IP addresses. So there is another question that we get asked very often from our partners is, okay, so but what is the business opportunity for us? Because this is on the customer environment. And so, yeah, what would be the business model? So basically, we are now in the private preview that will be launching soon for the Defender for ESM API. We have the same for the threat intelligence. So if you are an NDA partner, I really highly encourage you to come with us and work with us, in these private communities to be really able to influence and give feedback on those different products. So once the API will be available, we can imagine, for example, creating custom, reporting for your customers and also helping them to reduce the number of, internet-facing assets that are vulnerable. And so once the API will be available, the data will be, you can use that on Power BI, for example, so leverage, custom reporting that you can send to customer. And because we said previously, there will be a link between the ESM solution and the Defender for Cloud. So if you are also on the security posture management, so this information will also surface to the Defender for Cloud, which is again another opportunity for you to go and help the customer to solve basically the problems. Okay, so this is the pre-built type of reporting that we have and that exists. And now, what if you are running this POC, for example, this evaluation for a customer, and we don't have any pre-built attack surface for the organization. So in this case, you can go here to discovery, and remember we talked about the seeds. So you can just go here and add a new seed, and then the seed can be, so in my case it's a domain name, but you can add here an IP address, you can add many other things, and we can start and run again the attack surface discovery, and this will populate the different reporting that we have and that we have presented previously. So in a nutshell, this is our Defender for ESM solution. It is based on Azure, so the pricing will be per discovered assets in the approved state. This is very important. It needs to be in the approved state, okay? And so the pricing will be something along the line of $0.0011. And there are always options, to give you a better pricing depending on the number of assets that you have discovered. But for that, we need to get the name of the customer and work with the overall account team. So when you start the POC, we have 30 days. You can start with pre-built attack surface. So then you can immediately get access to all the reporting, all the vulnerability data. But if for some reason this is not working in your environment, so then you can start by using a different seed, so which can be an IP address, a domain name, an ASN number, and usually it takes up to 48 hours to really connect all the dots and present back the reporting. We are working on the APIs that will be available soon. We really highly encourage you to register for that and give feedback, and that will also help us to shape the next version of this product. So with that, I just want to pause here for a second to see if there are any questions in the chat window that I may be able to answer. So I will just check. Okay, so I'm not seeing any additional question. But again, please feel free to reach out to myself, Peter, or Frank, and all the team. We are all here to support you. And so with that, because I can't see any additional question, I'd like to ask Peter if he can join me to also go over the threat intelligence platform and explains how you can go and hunt and how you can also get this information back to Sentinel. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Samba. So as Samba's just mentioned, so we're just going to crack on a bit now with looking at the threat intelligence platforms. This is where we kind of roll up our sleeves a little bit and dive into the platforms. So I'm just going to share my screen again for you. And we're just going to take a look at two elements of this, right? We're going to look obviously at the threat intelligence platform, and we're going to walk through elements of that and what that looks like, and some of the data sets very briefly. And then secondly, what we'll do, we'll actually look at your friend and mine. We'll look at Sentinel, obviously, and we'll look at how that information is coming in, and some use cases around it, and obviously some kind of how that kind of interacts with your organization and how you can start putting out in kind of the important bits and pieces. Okay, so let's start here. Defender for threat intelligence. The portal itself is now fully Microsoft, and what you'll see on this front screen here, you'll see basically a search bar. Okay, the ability to search for anything on the internet, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. Okay, and then you'll see some what we call article cards here. Now, just in the previous session, you know, kind of we were talking about licensing and you know, community edition, the free edition versus the premium edition and things like that. And as you know, we go through this, I'll kind of point out some elements to you, which is, you know, which are behind the gate, so to speak, right? So the premium version versus the free version. So what you'll start to see here initially are what we call featured articles or gated articles, right? And these are a combination of some open source intelligence, okay? But more importantly, what you'll actually start to see here is you'll actually see very, very specific information that's been created by our analysts, okay? So, you know, we will take, as I say, you know, public source information if that's available, and then what will happen is our own team and our own analysts will start to actually build on this, you know, on these particular you know, articles and actually supply our own intelligence to that. So again, when you think about going back previously to all of those signals and all of that information from Xbox and Outlook and from Azure and from, you know, all sorts of places that Microsoft have, you know, that intelligence is going to start to feed into some of these articles. And you'll see it highlighted here, okay? If it's an open source intelligence indicator, okay, you'll see it here, but more importantly, what you'll start to see is, you know, very specific indicators from Microsoft here. Okay, so these, you know, these elements here, these domains and IP addresses and SSL certs and things like that have been looked at and verified by, as I say, by Microsoft analysts, okay, and linked to, you know, particular elements that we're seeing here. You'll start to see, you know, these tags, how they relate, you know, potentially these are, you know, groups that Microsoft are chasing, but also you'll see kind of, you know, links to APT and Fin groups and things like that. I'll click into some of these in a moment, okay, but more importantly, just to, you know, just to finish off this kind of element here, okay, is the fact that these are the gated articles, okay? These are the elements, as I say, that kind of are, you know, specific to Microsoft's own intelligence, okay? So, you know, while there's some public indicators, you know, they're being built on here with, you know, tradecraft and backgrounds, and as I say, kind of elements that make these things more searchable. As we move down, these articles here now are ungated. Okay, so these are available. So these gated articles sit there for you know, a number of weeks, and then they become ungated and available to the community edition. Okay, and you know, again, what you'll start to see as you kind of click in here, you'll start to see public indicators and the original source that they've come from. Okay, and just by going into those, you'll actually kind of get those indicators as well. So right from the home screen, right from the initial screen, you get kind of the latest and greatest threats that are out there. Okay, how they're affecting infrastructure, verticals that they're affecting, etc., but more importantly, you'll start to get all of the indicators that relate to these you know, these particular things here. So if we just jump into one of these particular elements here, I don't know, let's pick one, let's pick anyone, let's take a look. Why don't we go to the top one? Okay, you know, it's an indicator, right? It's something that has been registered and understood. Now, remember back to the previous session and the signals and you know, infrastructure that we're hearing and signals that we're collecting and bringing in. You know, the analysts have looked at this and they've attributed this domain to this particular you know, partnership between these two groups here. Okay. You'll have the domain, you'll have a score, so you'll see a malicious score if it's actually part of a part of an article card here. Okay, you'll have a summary, etc., that you can look at, but more importantly, what you'll start to have, certainly from a threat hunting perspective, is the data that sits behind that that particular article. And this is where it becomes gold dust for you guys, right? Because this is where you can now look at a particular article and you can now get all of the intelligence that sits behind it. Remember, you've just had one single piece of information, one IOC, you've had one domain, okay? That could be anything. All right, but now you've got a score, you've got an understanding of where it sits, but more importantly, now you have an awful lot of information that sits behind it. And some of this is very, very unique to the crawling capabilities that now sit within Defender for Threat Intelligence. And what I mean by that is, yes, you have WHOIS records, okay? You know as well as I do, some of that now is redacted due to GDPR and things like that. So some of these records now are not so useful. Okay, you'll basically see, deleted privacy, etc. But remember, as we're collecting information historically, sometimes we'll see the original kind of registration for these and things like that. But more importantly, things like the components that actually build up this particular domain. So what is it running on? Okay, the host pairs. So again, we can spend an awful lot of time looking at this, but what is calling on what to build up a page? A page isn't a static thing now. Okay, so it calls on lots of different elements. Okay, cookies and trackers and things like that, which again help you as threat hunters to understand the infrastructure and how far it goes, what it links to, and ultimately what's behind this particular domain. So you get an awful lot of information just from one particular item. Okay, now remember, you can basically type whatever you want into here, okay, and get kind of information relating to any particular domain or infrastructure that you want. If I could spell it properly, that would even be a greater thing, right? But you could type those in, get that information, understand what it is, whether it be a domain, an IP address, a particular component that you're searching for, Cobalt Strike, I think Samba mentioned before. You could actually type that in and get a list of that information back. So your threat intelligence platform, okay, while it has that internet graph provided by the RiskIQ technology, what's starting to appear into these elements now is very specific information from Microsoft and the other threat intelligence organizations that sit within Microsoft. So Mystic, DART, Area 52, Sonar, DCU, all of these different organizations will start to feed into this threat intelligence platform. So it starts to become very, very powerful. Okay. So that's the platform. That's great. We mentioned licensing before about an analyst license, the ability for a SOC analyst to actually start drilling into the data, to start doing these searches, to start understanding those IOCs, and start to being able to read the article cards provided by Microsoft and the the good analysts that sit behind that. Okay. And that's brilliant. That's fine. There's an awful lot of information there. And for many years, this has been the stable platform for many large organizations and, many government-based, departments as well. But what makes this even more interesting is when we start coming over to the Sentinel platform. Okay, because what we want to start to do is we want to start bringing this information now into Sentinel, right? So there are various feeds, there are various connectors and things like that, as you're aware, that actually start to bring this information in now. And as we previously mentioned, some of the information that is coming from Defender for Threat Intelligence is actually free and available to you. Okay. So if we start to look at what that, what that looks like, and and how that is currently presented to you and your and your defenders, I'm just going to search for the Defender for Threat Intelligence articles, because what we're starting to do now and what is available to you is anything that has been picked up as a particular item of interest, an IOC that has been registered within these articles, are automatically forwarded to Sentinel now. Okay, so you get those malicious IOCs already ported into Sentinel. So if anybody within your organization starts to interact with something that is known malicious from our threat intelligence, you will start to get an understanding of that. Okay, so for instance, if we start to take a look at some of these items here. So entity appears in Defender for Threat Intelligence article. You've got the name of the article, and then obviously what you've got is the Karen from accounts or whatever it is, what she's gone to, the IP addresses, etc., and obviously you've got an alert on those things. Okay, so you're now aware straight away that somebody within your organization has been interacting with something that has been part of an article card, something that has been pulled out that has been malicious, right? So you can see that and you can understand that, and you now run to Karen's desk and pull the cables out and do whatever it needs to do. And that is given to you, that link and that ability is free, right? That's part of that Defender suite. It's part of what protects you as a Microsoft customer. If you want to read that article, however, this is where you need your license. Okay, so you need your license to be able to actually start to read this now and understand the different components that are going on around that. Okay, so this is where the value add, if you like, of that workbench license, of that analyst license now comes into play, because remember, you've potentially only got one particular item here to look at. Okay, so you don't know what's around that now. You know that Karen's interacted with something, and now you need to go and understand what that is. So having that license allows you to read that article and ultimately understand the other areas, the other domains and IP addresses and IOCs that have been associated with that particular element. So if we dive into that a little bit more now, okay, and if we start looking at Karen here, obviously poor old Karen, she's obviously clicked on things that she shouldn't do. So what we're going to do now, we're going to use the power of Sentinel and our ability to actually start pulling out information now and understanding what that looks like. So I'm gonna run a Karen account, which I've set up before. Just remove that out of the way. We don't want that one there. He's out. Try that again. Okay. And let's just run that and see what we come up with. Okay, so we've run that query within our logs, and obviously we've got some hits that have come back here. Okay, and now we can start looking at these things and start to understand exactly what they are, exactly what Karen's been dealing with and looking at, and then we can start going back into Defender for Threat Intelligence to understand what this looks like. So I'm just going to pick on one of these here. Okay, always makes interesting reading here. I think I've selected one of these here, Okay, and what I've got is I've got a logon type, but I've got a 10. I've got a remote interaction here. So somebody from a external IP address, okay, has, you know, logged onto Karen's machine. I've got a remote connection here. Because I've got this IP address now, I'm able to select it and understand exactly what it is. Right, it's an unknown IP address to me. So if I go back to Defender here, okay, and pop that IP address into that search bar, okay, that's going to go out and start to bring me all the information that I need to know as a threat hunter regarding that particular IP address. Okay, so, you know, I've got a location for it. I can see it's a potentially suspicious IP address that I need to understand about. I know where it sits. You know, I've not got any other particular information around this at the moment, but if I then go into that data, okay, and remember, this goes back to the crawling and the infrastructure chaining that we spoke about earlier on. Okay, I can now see, you know, lots of different pieces of information that relate to this particular IP address. Taking a look at the components, I can now see that, you know, it was, you know, it's running Cobalt Strike. You know, there's some remote access stuff going on here. So instantly, I now know that this particular IP address is probably not something I want to see on my network, right, within my network. So now I can start, you know, going in there and looking at this and understanding where else this you know, this sits, right? Because obviously now I've got an issue and I need to I need to resolve it. Okay, so utilizing Defender for Threat Intelligence and all of those signals and all of that infrastructure chaining that is now being made available to you, and ultimately the power of Sentinel and the ability to search and the ability to have those alerts come through. Okay, suddenly is a very, very powerful tool for any SOC, whether it be, you know, an organizational SOC or it be a managed SOC, right? From a partner perspective, you now have, you know, the ability to, you know, bring threat intelligence into any managed SOC that you're providing for your customers, right? So some of the use cases there. Okay, I hope that was useful. I hope that was interesting to see. You know, Samba, I'm going to kind of hand back to you. I see there's some you know, elements in the chat here, so I'll kind of go on mute and switch my camera off and just have a look at those and see if I can answer those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have two questions, and the last one was really, you know, if we could get the logic app that triggered the report that you just in the showed. So actually, once we have the APIs available, we really will no longer really need to get, you know, the basically the logic app that will trigger this incident. But yeah, we can connect offline. If you can just send me an email or ping me. We can work together to make also the same thing in our demo environment. But again, shortly, we will get the APIs, so we will really no longer need that. So there are some questions around the APIs, but, you know, feel free to connect with us after this meeting, and we'll make sure that you are also included in the private preview for Defender for TI and Defender for ESM, and then you can, you know, work with the new features and get feedback directly to the engineering team to also help us basically shape the next generation of our TI and ESM product. So with that, I don't really see any additional questions for the MDTI and MDESM. So for now, we'll just pause again for I think 30 minutes before the next session, which will start at 2:45. So thank you again for you know, joining us for this session on introduction about TI and ESM, and the next session will be about the Entra permission management, where we will really also give you a demo that really shows you know, how to start the initial configuration. We'll also be joined by Brad from our team and Shelley that will give also their insight about how to remediate using the internal permission management solution, and some good information about our partner program. So please, bear with us, stay with us, and we have a bunch of new other features that we want to share with you. So with that, we will just have a break and get back in around 25 minutes.